Please. We're going to call this meeting to order. This is the Park Board meeting, City Hall, Laurel Street. Let's see, December 6th, 4 o'clock. Roll call, please.
Tim Boder.
Hello.
Kara Schaefer.
Yes.
Andrew Scheip.
Here.
Kevin Yeager.
Yes.
Troy Rushmeyer.
Very good. Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you very much. First item on our agenda is I'm looking for the approval of the agenda.
Move to approve, Shape.
Motion to approve by Mr. Scheip.
Second.
And a second by
Schaefer.
Schaefer. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Very good. All right. So our first item here is item number 5. This is new business, and new business 5A is our Mississippi Landing Trailhead Park Amphitheater rates and policies. So this is why we're all here. I'm hoping that all of us have put a little bit of time into this, some thoughts, and I'm sure Mr. Dean would like to kick us off on this and kind of lead us through this discussion and hopefully give a little structure to all of us here so we can work our way through this. Mr. Dean, please.
Yes, sir. So we have a few topics to kind of start with, and I'm sure there'll be a handful of other topics that kind of come up as we go through this process. But just to get an idea of the framework of, as we're looking at collecting reservations, what are going to be the rates and requirements of that amphitheater facility as we go into the next year after it gets completed. So it's going to be more, I was intending more conversational, just hammer out a few of these details. And like I said, as things continue to come up through this discussion of things that are not on this list specifically. So I guess the first thing, and I'll just kind of run it through the agenda here, is who is intended to run the events and how will the events be managed. I think it was in our intention that most of these would be self-run by whoever's renting the facility. On our end, it would be through an application process. I think I mentioned it in the previous meeting that we were thinking of something along the lines of an application, that application comes to the park board for approval before that reservation's kind of put and set in stone or on the schedule. So that way, if there are any issues, that there is a public forum available to air out those issues. Obviously, we can't necessarily discriminate about the use of it, but being able to address those needs in a public forum to at least those concerns and how to vet those concerns or address those pieces. So that was the intention there, is that it runs through that kind of an application process, very similar to how the city council handles event and street closure applications. So
Okay, very good. So, Mr. Dean, would you like to just take one item at a time?
I think so.
Very good. And one thing I would just like to point out, the idea of this, and I'm speaking mostly to those of you that are in the gallery, is that this is really intended to be a workshop type atmosphere here. So as opposed to having you guys come up and give your name and all of that kind of thing, one time we'll probably do, if we call on you, just maybe cite your name just for the record, but we really want this to be an open discussion. Just raise your hand, jump in, and we'll call upon whoever wants to jump in at the time. And the idea is for everyone to participate in this discussion here. So just so the people in the gallery know. Okay. All right, guys. So first item here, as Jesse's brought forth, is just generally how we would like to see this facility being used or specifically reserved. Mr. Dean has mentioned that the application process might be the way to go. So at this point, I'm just going to open it up to you guys, just first of all here on the board, for any comments or questions on that for staff first. And if we have no questions for staff, then, go ahead, Mr. Scheip, please.
Sorry, just thought of one. Is this a reservation that could go through the new, not ActiveNet, that's the old one, the replacement for that?
The Civic Plus?
Yes,
That would be the intention, is everything's run through the online system now.
Cool, awesome.
Any other questions for staff? Anyone?
And they're paying for their reservation in advance when they reserve?
I believe so. And then we'll have more discussions on deposit, no deposit, or all that as we go through this process. But whatever we deem as, if you're going to pay for the reservation in full at the onset or whatever it is, that would be part of that application process.
All right.
So I think within that reservation, if they're gonna go onto the site, I think it needs to be different than if they're going to Gregory Park. So I think we're gonna need to come up with a list of questions that we talk about today. So they would select the new park, and then it would come up like a bunch of new questions if possible, so that we make sure that we cover all the things that we're gonna discuss today, so they understand all that. Is that gonna be a possibility within the new system?
We can include whatever we'd like in that application. That's a good point. What specifically type of questions would you like to ask?
All right. I think what we'll do is we'll just save that question as we get just a little bit farther when we get into more of the use and the allowable uses, that kind of thing. A general question that I have is, if please, would somebody be required to fill out an application for every single time that they want to use the facility? Is that right? Is that what we're talking about, Jess?
I think so.
Okay.
Very similar to kind of our pavilions and stuff. If you want to reserve it for an event, I'll use pavilions like a birthday party, you would go through this application process.
Gotcha.
I guess one concern is the potential that it is behind the high school, kids kind of congregating there after school. Obviously, those wouldn't be an application type of process, but that is something that we would have to address. But if you wanted to reserve it for a specific event, whatever that event would be, you'd want to go through this process.
Understood. Okay, so my thoughts on this, guys, are the only thing here is the mobilization of an application, making it all the way through staff, and then eventually through us. If they landed incorrectly on our dates, hypothetically, they could be on almost a month-long wait to get approval on whatever it is that they wanted to do at this park. So that's my concern there. Now, I don't disagree that we shouldn't have a say, especially for larger events, but I'm wondering if there's a way that with these applications, we could filter smaller events that are within the parameters of what staff can just issue out without us specifically, acting upon it. And then maybe larger events would trigger, okay, this is the type of event that has to come before the park board. Mr. Badeau, please.
Well, I was just going to say that, we kind of currently do this, but it's two separate processes. So if you're applying for some kind of festival or something, there's just a different application for that. The actual rental of the unit could be separated from that. So you could still allow them to put down and reserve that date for that, but then have it noted they still need to go through a process in order to have their event approved. Because we kind of currently already do that.
And historically, Mr. Gorham, or did you have something? No. Yeah. Oh, okay. And historically, has this been a problem with a person coming kind of at the last hour? Maybe an event is only 2 weeks out. Of course, we wouldn't be able to act on it potentially in that amount of time, although we do meet quite regularly. But do we foresee that this may be a problem for some people who, aren't as pedantic about planning ahead?
The first year might be a challenge. I'll reference back to the event and street closure. Typically, we have kind of a routine and regular events that occur every year. I'll take, maybe the center wants to host a music event out there. I would anticipate that would be something more of an annual type of event that they would want to reserve it for. Usually those events are pretty well coordinated with those staff that they know it comes up every year. We try to remember those things and reach out to those people. Hey, you haven't put your application in. Are you still planning to do that event this year? So again, that first year, as we establish kind of the normal use of that facility and who wants to use it, it might be more of a clunky piece of somebody thinking in a couple weeks I want to use the facility. But hopefully after a year or two of that, people kind of fall into that routine that they understand they have to do it a month ahead of time.
Understood. So would somebody that just wants to have a birthday party, would they be required to fill out an application that would come before us? That's where I'm going with
That's
this.
kind of my point. If have something like an asterisk or something on the website saying that any size, party size more than 50, you have to have park board approval kind of thing beforehand. Otherwise, if it's only 11 people, who cares?
Right.
Then the staff can take
Some kind of a threshold of what staff can over-the-counter permit and then what would need to come for us. I would think things like food, music, once you start getting into those type of activities, that might be where we want to have a little closer look at some of those, but that's kind of what's coming out. Yes, Ms. Scheit, please.
So I know last time we had talked about having, was it $500,000 in liability insurance to, well, cover us, but also sort of discourage, right? Timmy's birthday with 10 people doesn't necessarily need the amphitheater. And so I wonder if maybe we won't keep that requirement, but if we do, I'm not sure you could get that coverage in 2 weeks. Maybe, I think, Dave, you've gotten that before, but
Yeah, I mean, depending on what the relationship is with their insurance group, it can be done, you know. It's always one of those things where you're calling someone and asking for them and whether or not they want to do it for you or not. But, I mean, it can be done, but yeah, you bring up a valid point. It depends on what your requirement would be. But do you think that you need that type of insurance for Billy's, you know, birthday party? I don't know.
Right.
yeah, do we want to limit the use of the brand new thing? Like, if it sits empty, is it good that we've excluded people? Probably not.
Right. So just generally speaking, I'm hearing a general consensus here that we feel like some version of a threshold should be created, that people can just come through staff, get a permit. So, Jesse, do you guys feel like you have enough? I always feel that it's easier for us to revise than it is to craft from dead scratch. Do you feel like you have enough that you could, that you guys could draft up some version of what you could, you know, what people could get over the counter, and then what would need to come back to us, that then a framework that we could work from on this particular issue alone?
I think the first thing that kind of comes to mind is putting a question in the application process of expected number of attendees, and maybe, I think the threshold, maybe 25. Below 25, you're talking about a small party, but above 25, you're talking more closer to an event.
Sure. Number sounds about right to me. I think the other triggers for me would be outside vendors, music, electricity use, those, you know, that type of thing. That's what I would be nervous about. Also, potentially an event running into our shoulder hours, evening, or those type, you know, where we might have considerations with our neighbors. But
Maybe it would be like, what type of event, right? So Billy's birthday, or are we hosting Billy's bachelor party? I don't know, at the park,
What time's that start?
right? And then maybe,
what time's it in? That's exactly it. So we were talking about having, just a little while ago, we were talking about having some boxes that you would check of what your use might be when you fill out this application. I think that you could use those boxes as the pre-filter to say, okay, if you check more, you know, these several boxes, this got to go to the park board. If you stay on this side of the map, you can do this over the counter. So is that, Mr. Bedell, please?
I was just going to say, and I wouldn't be afraid of putting a time limit on there. For any type of street closures, I believe it's 30 days, correct? So if you're asking for a street closure, it's a 30-day lead time on that. So I wouldn't have any problem with adding this to that as well.
I think it'd be a minimum, because it'd have to come to us first, then the city council. So
Yeah, and I think people just learn to deal with that.
yeah, please, Don.
Do you guys want to?
Yeah, come on up once, just one time.
Hello
Yeah,
there.
just so we know who you are.
Don Gorham.
Yep.
You know, you may want to consider making a distinction between the different parts of the facility, right? Because you have the amphitheater part, that's one part. We have what we've been calling the iconic learning center, the other shelter. That's another part, which could be basically treated as a park shelter and or a pavilion like you have in the current system. And then you have, of course, the canoe kayak launch. So you really kind of have three different elements, and you may have people that will have nothing to do with the amphitheater, so you may just want to consider having maybe a little lesser requirements for somebody that just says, well, we're going to have a canoe club or a kayak club is going to use it, and yeah, we'll have 25 people, but all we're going to do is kayak in and out and use the bathroom and things like this. So that's just my 2 cents worth on that. You may want to consider that you could divide it up a little bit.
I think you're right. Thank you, Don. Any other comments here?
yeah, that could come into play though too, if there's more than, if we're thinking of it as 3 entities, how big is each event and like the whole parking thing, but yeah, good point.
I think that on this first draft, we can get kind of a common sense kind of, I mean, I don't think that, you know, a school bus of kids that want to go down there for a learning experience necessarily needs to come before us. But I think that once you start getting into those activities, which may be disruptive to either safety, traffic, or the neighbors, that's when we want to take a look at it. So do you feel like you have enough to go off of, Jesse, to at least draft a framework on this first portion, the application process?
I believe so.
All right, very good. I'm going to just ask anybody else in the gallery or anybody else if they have any other thoughts on this first portion, and if not, we'll move on.
By this time next year, it might be a whole different idea. You know, you never know the first year how it's going to turn out.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, hearing none, we'll continue on to your second item. Mr. Dean, please.
Okay, this one will be a fun one. Fees, rental fees, how we want to do this with, do we want to have a different one for profit, nonprofit, resident versus non-resident, hourly versus daily? I believe I put in the memo some other very similar facilities to kind of compare to. I believe in my conversation at the park board the last discussion on this is, it would be our recommendation to more make this a daily type of reservation rather than hourly. Just the administration of an hourly reservation would be difficult. I mean, we have to have staff, and then if you're reserving it on a Sunday, that's staff that has to be out there on a Sunday to really enforce it. And are we really getting the effect that we want by making sure that somebody reserved for 3 hours is only there for 3 hours? Or it just adds a lot more complexity to it rather than daily. It allows for somebody to really enjoy that facility, set up the way that they want. They don't have to rush into it. They can have their event and then worry about takedown. We felt that daily was probably the more appropriate action there. Like I said, the other thing that you see with a lot of these is a difference between resident and non-resident fees, where if you're coming from out of town, that fee does go up. And if I remember right, there was a number that I put in there for just discussion, but essentially I just put in there a dollar amount of $100 for residents per day and $125 per non-resident. Just looking at some of the other charges for these types of facilities, as well as kind of what we're charging for our pavilions currently, and this is maybe a little bit step more than some of those pavilion facilities, as this has the amphitheater seating. This is a little bit more of an intense type of facility, so I thought 100 made more sense. Cancellation, I think, just for simplicity, keeping that same as we just kind of approved with Lum Park camping, although you could make the argument that this facility would be even more difficult to fulfill if somebody cancels even within a month. The campground, you could probably make the argument it's going to be a little bit more easier to fulfill if somebody cancels. This one's going to be a lot more tougher because, like I said, you're probably going to have those routine events, and if an event drops off, there may not be that extra piece of it.
Gotcha. Okay, so before we move on to cancellation, good point. Let's just try and see if we can navigate this first section of fees and fee structure. So just for the sake of conversation here, we're going to say that we have a baseline fee, and then we'll just kind of go through the bullet points of potential groups who could potentially realize some version of a discount. I just made a quick little list here. So from our baseline fee, would we as a group think that residents should get a discount over non-residents? And I'll open that up for discussion.
Yes.
Seems to be the norm. I mean, it's, looking at all the other cities doing their amphitheater things, looks like it's either, if it's only $10, it's definitely a difference.
Okay. So discount, again, just assuming this is a discount from the baseline fee structure. Residents I'm hearing consensus that residents do to get a discount, yes? Okay. Next one here would be for-profit versus non-profit entities. So 501(c)(3)s versus somebody who actually wants to throw a concert down there and try and make a few dollars. Do we feel that we should be creating a fee structure that supports one group over the other? Again, I'll just throw it out to you guys. It is a tricky one.
My thought was like maybe we ask for a donation after, but then that's like, how do you collect the donation? Kind of what I was thinking. It was for, but
That's a great point.
you can't expect someone to give you a donation.
I think that, for me personally, I'll just jump in. My question on this one is that the ultimate goal is to get people in our parks, really, whether they be residents, non-residents, for-profit, not-for-profit, and if people can use our park, even if it is for-profit, it's great because it means they're using our they're getting people into those parks, even if it means they're making money off of it, which is awesome. So that's just mine. On this one here, I'd prefer probably to not split the cost difference between profit or non-profit, but I'll pass it along for anybody else who wants to speak. Mr. Bedell, please.
We don't do that for any of our other facility rentals, do we? I don't think we do.
I think it'd be more of a deduct for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not an additional charge for a for-profit. It'd be a
That's
deduct.
that's the way that I was taking it.
We do the tennis courts for free.
What do we?
I have that one coming up here first. High school student-related stuff or athletics.
My point to that would be that, yeah, like as a nonprofit, I don't expect to get a discount on it, but, you know.
Please, yeah.
So I know we have asked if they're nonprofit before on our sheet of paper, so I do believe we might have used to do that. I don't know if we still continue to do it this past year or not. We can look into that. Just something to reference the non-resident first residents. We can do that in the new software. We'll just need to know exactly what you mean by non-residents and residents, because some people that think they're from Brainerd might not, you know what I'm saying, that clarification, but I think we can make that adjustment in our software.
Okay.
Just in case that was something you were curious about.
All right, thank you. Yes, please, Gabe.
Gabe Johnson, 1501 Rosewood Street. I was the park board liaison like 7 and 8 years ago, and we had the question of for-profit or nonprofit because we did give facilities for free to nonprofits and charged for-profits. But also, the time I was on there, we stopped doing that. The question is still on the application,
Right.
but we intended to still just charge everybody equally for what it actually costs to be on the.
So the
Use
question
the
on the
facilities.
application was more for data acquisition than anything, right? Right. General consensus I'm hearing is no difference for profit versus nonprofit. Is that right? All right, very good. We'll continue on. We have another group that potentially could be looking for some version of a break here, and that would be students or education-related groups. ISD 181, I could see outside school districts using the park. Do we create or any type of a spiff for those types of groups?
I think looking at the amphitheater separately from the learning center, I think the learning center, that needs to be free for schools, ISD 180, St. Francis, Discovery Woods, whoever. The amphitheater, I'm not sure. It's a pretty nominal cost, I think, unless we see the school trying to use it twice a week for something, then we can look at that. But yeah,
So if they came to the learning center and did something, but then they wanted to use the amphitheater to have lunch. I don't know, you know, like, there's gonna be a bunch of kids there. You're just like, you can't go on there because you didn't rent it? I mean, that's,
Well, it'd be like any other,
mean-
it'd be like any other rental. If you don't rent it, you don't have the right to say, everyone else cannot use this. I have rented this.
Right.
You know, you
so they
just
can
have access to
use
it.
But yeah.
I'm not gonna get up in front, but I'm just gonna say, as a comment, no. I know the school employees are not aware that they have to rent, those facilities, cause they got in trouble. Garfield goes down to, Lum every year and got chastised for using a, pavilion last year that was not rented by them. So at this point, they are not even familiar that they are aware that they have to rent or put in time for those spaces too. So that probably needs to be known on that stuff as well. So.
Thank you.
It's available to use, they can use it, right? If no one else had the rental, so.
Yes, I think the question here that would come up is more of that amphitheater where you have additional costs that come in, trash removal, you have the additional burden potentially. But we've also, unless I'm mistaken, and somebody could maybe help me with this a little bit, but we've also made it fairly clear that like our tennis courts and those types of spaces for school district use are gratis, correct? Is that not right? We don't charge the school district to use our tennis courts for practice, correct? So this is part of the baseball, everybody try to get along, use each other's spaces type of mentality. So my personal leaning here would be not to, although, you know, ISD 1 is very proud of their structures and spaces and are more than happy to charge people to use them and as well they maybe potentially should be, but as in a reciprocative type of relationship that we're trying to foster here, I think we could, my leaning would be to not charge any additional for it.
Sometimes it's good to set precedent in.
Correct.
In the favorable position.
Yeah, lead by example, right? Yeah, very good.
So to clarify, that's for both Learning Center and amphitheater.
I think that the amphitheater, to me, this is my opinion, but the amphitheater to me triggers a whole nother scenario just because there is potentially staff time. And again, I think it kind of goes into those boxes that get checked. Do we need to go back over there and do cleanup? Do we need to go back down over there and do trash removal? Do we have, any additional costs that might come in? I just think we have to be wary of that.
But if the school district wanted to reserve the amphitheater, we would not charge them? Or we would charge them for the amphitheater, not the Learning Center?
I think there's an easy potential for them to put in an application and the park board could waive that fee if they so choose. That would be an easy way, because you could then look at the parameters that say, okay, you're using it, i.e. for lunch, I don't think the park board is gonna charge.
Great
that,
point.
but-
Yeah, the application may trigger them into us anyways, so, on that amphitheater use.
So as of right now, as part of the application, so we'll just leave the Learning Center alone because that's kind of its own thing too. But for the amphitheater, the intention would be that they would pay for that application, but it could be waived. So that'll be, again, part of that application process is most likely going to prepay for the fee. So do we do prepay for the fee, and if we decide to waive it, that we would refund it back to them? I just wanted to clarify that part of the process.
Gotcha, and that's a little complicated because there's multiple structures we're talking about just the amphitheater, right?
Just the amphitheater, yep.
So you're saying when they put an application in, you're gonna ask for a credit card right away to like hold it, and they're kind of like holding the application, and then it'll be refunded if we deny it or something?
Yeah, I think the intention here would be that no matter what the reserved use of it would be, is that it would be paid at the time of the reservation.
I think you
So
almost
even
have
if
to.
it was me reserving it, that I would have to pay for that. And it would be really tough for us to put together a structure in the online application to let them put the number in there. We would have to just say it's this charge. Now, we do have the option of refunding it back. It's just staff administrative time to refund it back. So we can do that. It's just back end time.
And I think that's maybe a good way to do it, because we'll just kind of see what begins happening here and what groups begin to, want to use this, and potentially repeat groups as well.
Yeah, because I think no matter what, I feel like we have to have some money, even if it is a school district, because what if they decide not to come and then we couldn't rent it? And then maybe it gets refunded at the end again. All these things we don't know. But yeah, I think depending on the event, we might have to charge them.
Okay. So general consensus, anybody else? General consensus here is that everybody pays the same. Potentially for large events, we would review it anyways and could potentially come up with some version of a deduct or gratis use, right? What I'm hearing, Mr. Bedell.
Just a question on the dollar amount. Is that high enough? Is it not high enough? We charge quite a bit just for the rental of, let's say, the pavilion at Lombard, or at Gregory Park. You're paying not much less than this to rent Gregory Park Pavilion. I just want to make sure we're putting the right number on that.
I want to save the conversation of dollar amount for just a little bit ahead of us here and just get through this deduct or group consideration conversation first, then we'll go on to some of those other parts and pieces, if that's all right. The other group that I can think of would be, yeah, please.
So going back to that, this is gonna get tricky for us if we're gonna okay, some people we're gonna approve and some people we're not. How is that not gonna seem like favoritism?
It happens every day in government, is what I would say. You look at each particular, that's my opinion, you look at each particular instance of what's coming up and what that group is and what their involvement is, what their contribution is to the city. And I think that, I agree that as a group, we have to be very careful to not seem biased or partial to one particular entity. But the other option is, as you say, this is the way it is, like it or leave. And I would prefer to have some degree of malleability with these groups that are going to begin to come out of the woodwork that want to use this, especially in the front end. That's just my 2 cents. But
Care to clarify, you're asking for use, not necessarily fees, is that correct?
Oh,
Or both?
fees, I think.
Okay.
So if we're gonna charge some people in the school district or whatever, but not everyone, if we're maybe gonna waive the fee for some groups and not others, then that's where.
Well, it sounded like it was just the school district.
But potentially, and this gets into the conversation of in-kind services, which are a really powerful tool for entities to use within a city to help each other out, that are effectively taxpayers are paying for the whole service as a whole. So that's where I see the potential for in-kind service. So to me, the only group that really is dinging a bell for me that this may be a part for would be the school district or school entities, but I may not be thinking of it.
And then that is something that we could just write into the policy potentially. I mean, I'd have to clarify if that would be acceptable, but if we could write it into the policy that school district may be waived based on request to the park board.
They may not even request.
Correct.
I could see churches reserving that on Sunday possibly.
Yeah, that's on my group here.
Are we going to,
Yep.
Well, to Gabe's point, you did go through at one point, because churches were allowed free, and this happened just very recently. You guys made that decision to not allow churches to have it for free.
Good.
Your other facilities.
Good? We have at least enough to keep going? I think so, right? So another group that pops into mind, it would be senior-type groups or senior citizens of any sort. Do we give senior citizens a break on any of the facilities? This would be amphitheater or otherwise, or any paid use.
Do we anywhere else? I don't believe we do, we?
There was a question at one point about the campground. Did you ever do that?
I think they get 5% or $5 off, don't they, in a campground?
Oh, yeah, with our new rates, we just changed that. What does the center get now for using the park every Thursday?
Nothing, I don't think.
That's waived?
We get people in the parks. I guess to me, it comes to, this fee isn't to generate profit, it's to help us maintain the space. We have grass we want to actually keep watered and healthy. The lighting, the rigging, right, it's a little bit more of a facility, trash collection after the event. It's not like we're profiting from the event, this helps us maintain the thing we've built. So I would, I guess, be against trying to single out a lot of groups and just do our best to keep the cost of the rental as close to our cost to maintain as possible.
I like that. That gets us through the remaining groups of military, church, all of that, so. Okay, anybody else? Any thoughts? Yes, please, Mr. Johnson.
Well, it's a $2.5 million park. Everything's gonna fall apart in 20 years, so we need to have $125,000 a year on the books. We don't necessarily need to make that revenue, but we need to have in our heads that it's $125,000 a year
Yep.
to have this park exist, right? That's just something to keep in our minds, but keep the fees low because we want people to use the parks.
Right. Okay, so I think I'm hearing consensus here, unless corrected otherwise, that generally we're going to keep our rates basically where they are. Small deduct for resident, is that right? And everybody else is kind of on the same. Seniors, were we deduct on the seniors? No, everyone's.
Resident seniors.
Resident seniors, okay, well, all right. Very good. Any other groups that I may have missed?
Double asterisk.
Or anybody else that we think should get some version of a deduct or a break from the fee structure?
What is a resident of Brainerd, or are we talking Crow County?
Resident of Brainerd.
Okay.
Well, yeah, to me it would be resident of Brainerd, but
Could it be
station for the group.
like an organization based in Brainerd?
That was the nonprofit to me, but
That's what it's gonna be. They're gonna
Yeah.
try everything.
Well,
I mean, I would too.
it's not gonna make or break us either way, you know. And the problem we're gonna have is if the software can handle it either way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's gonna be the deciding factor.
So we can put the price in there for resident versus non-resident and make it like a checkbox and I guess call it honor system maybe. That they know if they're from out of town that they're paying the non-resident fee, and if they're from in town. If they want to make the argument that I live out of town, but the center is in town,
we can certainly say there are no deductions at all and just fix our first rates for the first year and see what happens. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Park Board. I think the issue that you may have with that is that a lot of people have Brainerd addresses, but don't live within the city limits of the city of Brainerd. I think just the taxpayers of Brainerd are who maintains our parks through the levy. So if you're looking at that, I guess I would suggest looking at Brainerd residents specifically, Brainerd businesses, that's up to you. And I think that we could confirm those addresses.
Just make it a check that just asks, are you a resident?
Yeah,
of
just
the
as
city
a,
of Brainerd, and they have no idea that they're getting a discount. Then magically it takes $5 off.
And realistically, would this be prohibitive to any group if they didn't get the deduct? Be like, oh, guess we can't use it.
Honestly,
Pay the extra $5, we're out.
as a nonprofit, I don't expect to get a discount on things, so I don't think so. You're not. Well, I expect that we have a duty to find funding to do the operations that we want to do. So,
All right, so I'm sensing a trend here that is cycling us back towards no discounts per groups. Is that right? To start? All right, very good. We'll move on.
One flat fee for everybody.
Well, you got it. Fixed fee structure. It doesn't mean that we can't ask for just data collection on our applications, whatever we think we might want to know, but that's a conversation for another day. Okay, we'll move on. What was, you have a next item that is dinging a bell for you, Mr. Dean?
Dollar amount.
Dollar amount, okay, so, all right, here we are. Let's take a look at your proposal on the dollar amounts and get a little conversation going on where we think we lie here.
So for reference, I'll bring up some of the pavilions from the website. So we have Monday through Friday rates, and we have Saturday through Sunday. Generally, the weekend ones are either $70 or $85. The Monday through Fridays are $50 or $65. I think you're probably looking at a lot of weekend events. There might be a weekday one, depending on maybe a holiday or something like that, but you're probably not seeing a ton of weekday ones. The other piece of that is, to your point, we have a little bit more infrastructure here. We have irrigation and stuff, and how much more maintenance would have to go into that, cleanup. If you have a lot of people in that tiered seating, that's more staff time that has to kind of walk those aisles and kind of clean that up. So that's where the additional cost over and beyond some of these other facilities where it's all kind of contained, where this is a lot more of a spread out type of facility. So we would have to probably spend more staff time to maintain after an event.
Understood.
Jesse, do you have kind of I realize the space isn't done. Do you have a guesstimate of like how much staff time it would take to say walk through the whole area plus haul out some trash?
That you almost depend on the event. I mean, if you completely trash it, it's going to take you hours. If it's a gun wrapper here and there, they can go through it pretty quick. I would say just for an average event, you're probably looking at 3 to 4 hours of a staff person to go through the seating and just clean up all the garbage between that and the garbages at the amphitheater. If there was more, it could go up, obviously, depending on.
I see on your proposal you have daily, or full daily. I'm not opposed to going minimum hours either. All the other cities look to be, except for Detroit Lakes, is doing hourly with a 3-hour minimum, well, 2-hour minimum for St. Louis Park. If they're only there for a couple hours, that's kind of a wasted park for the rest of the other 12 hours of the daylight that's there.
So you're a proponent of the minimum concept, right? Is what you're
Correct.
saying, yep. Yeah, Mr. Shape?
Oh, I thought we talked about, we didn't get to
Daily.
that yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
daily.
yeah,
Please, Don.
Is it ridiculous to expect that groups can clean up after themselves? Is that absolutely?
In my experience, yes, 100%.
It's mentioned.
No, and then you put a deposit, and you lose your deposit if you don't clean it up. I don't know. Seems to me that I'm an old Boy Scout. You can't pull out what you bring in. You're supposed to what you do. Maybe I'm probably being a little idealistic, but I think
The key to that, obviously, is the walkthrough beforehand to make sure that it's clean before they got it. Because
Sure.
that's the argument that comes up, is it was dirty when we got it, kind of thing. But if you could, I'm all on board.
So the only problem with not doing daily is, so let's say like for 4th of July, right? We'd have to set up for it, and typically we're setting up either earlier in the day or later in the day or the night before, it becomes easier for us to just say, we just want it for 2 days, and just pay for the 2 days and know, as opposed to what, ideally, like Jesse said, you're gonna get people that are then gonna try and work the system, and show up early, they're gonna leave late, one of the biggest issues we have with the system that the school district has in place is, we're basically the same scenario. We're like, we'd really like from July 2nd to July 4th, so we have time to put in, take down, and not, worry about that. But they're in an hourly system, and it's, now we're 72 hours, and looking at the different data. So it, especially for something where you're dealing with bringing in equipment for like sound and that sort of thing, it would just be easier for those people, I think, to have it be daily.
Is there anyone that would like to speak up that's generally opposed to the daily rental? Just the daily?
Well, I said that before, but it looks like the majority of the cities are going hourly with a minimum of 2 or 3 hours. There's a few that also have the daily $85 fees. It just seems to me like if you're only gonna be there for a couple hours for an awards ceremony or something small, you're wasting that park for the rest of the day.
Right.
It could be minimum, I don't know, I don't even know how to word that. Here's Phelan Park in St. Paul, $80 for the first hour and a half, $50 for each additional hour after that. So you're not wasting a lot of hours in that park if they're only going to be there for 3 hours.
Right. And this potentially is something that we could fret out in the first year. If we actually reveal that there are groups that want it for church on Sunday and then another group wants it that day, I think that would probably reveal itself in the first year, and then we could maybe address that as it comes, would be my thinking. But I'm good to talk about with what you're saying, Tim, is that you have an hourly concept. You've read through why we like the daily, but you have a minimum hourly, and then it is potentially up to daily. But
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Tim. Thinking about a software development concept, because that's how my brain works now. Keep it kind of as simple as we can to start, and let's add complexity to the policy as we go and we find scenarios. Like Kevin said, church Sunday morning, barbecue in the afternoon. Let's have those examples in front of us and then say, yeah, hourly does make sense. But
Yeah, the first should be a learning curve, that's for sure.
yeah, just say, yep, it's X dollars per day, and discover those conflicts.
The one thing we can do if we get requests for people to essentially overlap on the same day, we could always coordinate that with the other renter and say, hey, potentially they could split the cost if they're going to rent it for the day. But like you mentioned, the church only wants it for a few hours in the morning, and this other group wants to use it in the afternoon. Hey, why don't you talk to the church and potentially just split it, and you're still renting it for a day, and then if that continues, if that demand is there, we can relook at this in the next year and say, hey, that there was a handful of different requests for similar days.
Okay.
Maybe that hourly does have a lot of demand.
So maybe just do hourly Monday through Thursday or Friday, because you're saying hourly is too hard because of staffing. So we're still not gonna have staff on a Sunday to make sure, or if they don't want to split or whatever. So it could just be hourly is only available when we have staff to be the person that tells them, okay, it's 4 o'clock. Although I'm sure you guys don't want to have to do that either, but.
Yeah,
at
the
least-
challenge would be on the back end too, is when did they leave type of thing. And
Yeah,
But you're right, though, Saturdays and Sundays require a full day rental.
yeah. I don't know, that would be a way around it if someone really wanted it. Because, yeah, an award ceremony, like, I'm thinking the high school, like, they're gonna be right there. They could go over there for an award ceremony or for whatever. They might want it, not want to have to get it for the whole day, because they're only gonna be there for 2 hours. But,
the daily kind of works like a minimum also. It's kind of to your point. That does become our minimum, and then I say we just don't know what we don't know, and we'll see what happens in this first year and see if we actually do get a lot of groups that are trying to use it on the same day, and then we may want to address it. We could even address it halfway through. If we start seeing a lot of applications roll in April, May, and June, and we say, well, we got a problem here. We have multiple groups that could be using this on the same day, then I think we could address as we go. Does that work? Okay, all right. So the amount, we have to talk about the amount. We're getting back to it. Sorry about that, Jesse, but we are cycling back. the amount you have proposed here, just kind of walk us through it, what you're thinking here on the cancellation, or the amount with the cancellation, and we'll see if we think it feels right.
Again, this is just based on using resident versus non-resident, but let's just take resident for ease of discussion here. So as mentioned, the other pavilion facilities that are a little bit more contained, were between 70 to 85 on the weekends. Knowing that this facility is a little bit more bigger and potentially a little bit more staff time to maintain, that's where we felt the 100 was a little bit more appropriate. This is about roughly about 2.5 hours of a maintenance staff between wages and benefits. That doesn't really include materials or anything like that for cleaning up, but just 2.5 hours of somebody's straight time. Now, again, you could have a really bad event. The guy's going to spend 3/4 of a day there, but I don't think we wanted to have a variable rate based on the kind of mess you left, but figure 2.5 is probably appropriate.
All right, thank you. Any questions on that? And otherwise, we'll just open it up for discussion here. Mr. Bedell?
150.
There you go, perfect. We got a bid for 150.
Who'll give me two?
My basic my basic thought process is you have a brand new product, you're getting ready to put it out in the world. You just pick something that you don't want it so high, you want most people to have access to it, and then you reassess as that product is being used to see if it's in a high enough demand that it would allow us to increase the price without cutting out accessibility. So I'm 100% fine with 150 as well.
I'm also fine with the damage deposit as well.
Like cleanup damage deposit kind of concept.
Yep, like a $500.
I like it.
$500 deposit.
Oh, $500. We got a $500 deposit.
Want it back? You want it back? It's just to make sure your park stays clean.
Okay, let's, are we hearing that we're good on the 150? We'll talk about the damage deposit. We're good on the 150 daily?
150 is 7 days a week. We don't want to charge more for the weekends.
I was thinking 150 weekend. That seems like for my organization, absolutely 150.
Per day or for both days of the weekend?
I would say weekend, that would be the weekend rate in my eyes.
Per day though, 150 per day or 150 for Saturday, Sunday?
Oh, no, I was thinking 150 per day.
That's what I
That's
thought.
what I was thinking. And then if you wanted, if you wanted,
Keep it simple.
Yeah,
It's
you
all up to
think
you.
the same for a Monday versus a Saturday? Yeah, I guess we don't know.
We don't know what we have, just move forward and fix it.
And with campgrounds, right, we have holidays and NHRA weekend. We keep adding detail, and that makes sense for the campgrounds because we have that history. And with this,
Yeah, we don't have history.
nobody knows. So
All right, I'm hearing consensus on 150. All right, let's roll. How about a damage deposit we're gonna call it, what do we want to call it? A cleanup, park cleanup fee? You get it back, just it would require that somebody looks at it ahead of time, would require that somebody looks at it afterwards, which sounds like we would be doing anyway, is that correct?
So that would be a bit of a challenge too, let's take a Sunday reservation, for instance. You have to have a staffer that would go out there on a Sunday before the event and then a staffer after the event too. So if you're potentially putting on overtime on let's say we didn't have a temp staffer to be out there, you're putting overtime on maybe a maintenance employee to be out there. So if I would recommend if you're going to do a damage deposit, it's more restricted to damage, and that general maintenance cleanup is just kind of part of the bill.
Okay. There is the hotel, sorry, I'll get you one sec, Dave. There is the hotel concept here that you just have a card on file, and then if a problem comes up and there is damage, then you have that phone call and say, hey, what happened to the lights and blah, 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 something like that. But, Mr. Johnson, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't know about you guys, but I have, it's not in my pocket actually, it's on this chair. I have this thing, it's like a computer and everything. It has a camera on it. And I could take pictures, if it was messy when I showed up, to submit to the park department,
All right.
board, hey, it was messy.
Rental car style. All right.
That's what I was going to recommend, is just put language in there that just says, snap a photo if
If
you
there's
show
something
up and it's wrong.
let us know. That's not your responsibility. We understand.
Awesome. Still keep the cleanup deposit though, for if they leave it in a disaster?
I think it's
Way to go,
a good
babe.
idea. That would make people clean up.
Right, okay. How much?
If you put onus on the responsibility to make sure it's clean, somebody's gonna own up to it.
All right, so what do we think about 150 daily and a $50 cleanup deposit? You get the 50 back if it looks good when we roll in. Done.
So then are you asking people to pay staff to clean up and potentially not get their damage deposit if they don't clean up? It seems like you're kind of hitting them a couple times. Just a thought.
Well, I think that was your concept though, right? Is if they
Well,
don't
I
clean,
threw
this
it
was
out
the
there.
motivation for them to
Yeah.
clean up themselves.
But I was almost thinking that in lieu of paying the staff to clean it up. So instead of saying, you're not gonna have to clean it up, we're gonna take care of it. That was actually what I was trying to come to. And then it became kind of the $500 damage deposit. So to me, it'd be like, well, you don't have to pay, this big staff fee, or $200 or 150, I guess is the number right now. If you clean it up yourself and you do it and you take care of it.
Okay. And so that's more like that's more like the hotel style where you're not going to charge for it, but we got your credit card on file. If we show up on Monday morning and it's a disaster and there's damage, then we're going to have a conversation.
That's kind of what I was trying to get at, yeah.
That's what's kind of how we do with all our other pavilions. If something came up like that in all our other pavilions, that's how we would handle it now. We don't take a cleanup deposit on anything else, correct?
Seems to me the best deposit would be 1 day's rent, one day's fees.
So 150, 150.
What about, I'm just thinking of a nonprofit, like a real, like startup nonprofit that has no money when they start their event.
You have to pay the
Where are
deposit.
they gonna come up with this money?
You have to
It'll
pay
be
the
a-
deposit when you make the reservation.
Have they thought about using Gregory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they should. this is-
Can we draw upon some historical data here? How big of a problem is it for us, or has it been, that our pavilions are left with in a disaster? And I'm asking Katie, just because
Yep.
you've been here
Yeah.
a long, I mean,
We've had some situations, I would say, common in the campground, usually resolved, Kim usually resolved it, made it right. But we do have a cleaning deposit, and the key deposit for our kitchenette rentals, so, for Gregory and then also for Memorial, both have the kitchenette options. So if it's not clean, they don't get the 25 back. But it hasn't been an issue yet with the kitchenettes, to my knowledge.
and if it is, you make a call and you're like, hey, whatever.
Well, we wouldn't give them back the cleaning deposit.
Okay, so we do have a cleaning deposit on kitchens and
Yeah.
those types of things right now. How
Yeah,
much is
but
that
we-
deposit? It's
25. So it's 25
yeah,
for
okay.
the cleaning, 25 for the key.
So just to clarify, if you're doing a cleaning deposit, is it if they have to go out and pick up anything, or is it this, I mean, what's the level of disaster that says
No
you don't
idea.
get it back?
My thinking would be, it would be an obvious, within reason, and an obvious,
Much like Gabe said, everybody's got a phone with a camera on it.
if birthday cake is smeared all over the seats, or what, I don't know, whatever. But
I would say err on the side of not saying that they've trashed it,
first, right?
Most people have not trashed it.
Right.
We should be able to establish what we think trashed is.
Yeah, general use is not trashing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So am I hearing no cleanup deposit?
To start out with, maybe.
Works fine for me.
Yeah, and if we have situations,
We address it as it begins to reveal itself.
From 500 to nothing.
I know.
Yeah.
You were betting on people's poor behavior,
I was
Tim.
hoping for a little
It's never
support.
safe, never a good way to go. Okay.
Well,
All
again,
right,
of the
consensus is
all the
no
deposits-
cleanup deposit this year yet.
That 150.
Yet to be determined. Definitely not the 150, I don't
I
think.
thought 150 is what we're charging though.
150 is the daily.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And if you leave a mess, you're gonna get a stern phone call from Mr. Tim Bower.
No, I've only got 3 weeks left. I'm on senior slide.
We're
They can do whatever they
putting
wish.
you on cleanup patrol.
They can do whatever they
We're gonna
wish.
ask you to be our inspector for.
I will waddle by there a few times.
Okay, very good. Are we good on the 150?
Yep.
All right, very good. We're moving on. What else do we got, Mr. Dean?
All right, parking. How do we want to address parking here? Do we want to say that, in a big event over 50 and you got to tell us outside of the on-street parking that you got right there, how are you planning to do it? Are you going to talk with the school district about using their parking lot? Or are you just going to rely on what's available for on-street on East River, which is restricted, I guess, because you go further north of the park and there's only on one side and you have the high rise to contend with. South of the park, you have a little bit more flexibility, just not during school hours. So do we not care what they do with their parking? Or if you have an event that you're saying, I'm going to have 100 people here, where are you going to put them? And just at least indicate what your intentions are.
All right, I see like 5 hands up here, so we're gonna go through this. First, any questions for Jesse before we go into comments? 1, 2, 3, not it. Mr. Johnson, you're up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the day. I think you guys should not worry about parking at all at this time and address it as it comes to you.
Very good. Mr. Bedell.
Yeah, my comment is that is not a ball of wax we want to get involved with. We don't do it with any other of our events. If you want to put it on like, as a question on the application that comes before you guys, if there's a larger event that's happening, what is your plan for it, or do you have any concerns with it? I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but like I said, you want to start talking about Gregory Park when we do Arts in the Park, you want to start talking about parking. I mean, it's just a part of being a part of a city.
Understood. Anybody else? Right down the line. Kara.
Want to make sure that we say they cannot park in the grass. Like, they cannot park on any piece of the grass. It's not gonna become 4th of July parade. What did you say?
Bollards.
Oh,
Bollards.
so no parking on our nice, new, beautiful grass, or any grass along that road if we
Yeah,
can.
we can
I'm
put
assuming
it,
that's in a conversation of uses that we're going to get to. It's-
yeah, we can put that in the, and we'll get into like, when we get into noise, we can put that as a requirement on the
in the
application. saying,
boldest
hey,
letter.
by the way,
20-point bold letter, single space, underlined. No, anything?
Yes.
Okay, hit it.
I believe we designed part of the peanut to accept food trucks.
We did.
So we'd want to clarify that if you have vendors, they could be in mid-peanut area.
And how to handle that exactly, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then if they need additional handicap spots, just facilitating that conversation with the police department, who I assume manages, maybe that's your team, Jesse, I don't know. But
so we have, I believe, 2 spots, or there's 2 spots painted out currently for handicap. What I've done in the past is if, like a church wanted to restrict additional spots for handicap, I've allowed them to just put temporary signs up if they wanted to allow for that. Just make sure you pull them whatever after you're done.
Very good.
So I don't think that would be too much that we'd have to address.
yeah, that's my only.
I'm next in line. I would like the application to be as simple and easy to start off with. We'll see if it becomes a problem. Mr. Boder, your floor is yours if you want it.
Well, say, if they're renting the pavilion, are there gonna be people that can't park there with their kayak drop off? So, you can't really put a price on a parking lot or limitations because you don't know who's gonna be using the park the entire time.
It's another complicating factor, absolutely, for sure. All right, sounds like we're in consensus on that, Mr. Dean. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Don, please.
Well, first of all, I hope we have a parking problem. I hope
Me
so
too.
many people show up, there's just a massive parking problem. But the county, during the development of the park, the county basically said, after hours, weekends, their parking lots would be fair game. And so that's there. There is the concept of overflow parking. There is a place that could be considered. So that's all.
Oh, okay, very good. All right, Mr. Dean, what's next?
Fun
Real
one.
quick,
Noise.
we're having, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No overnight parking, correct?
No overnight parking.
So people that are putting their kayaks on the river, they can't park their vehicle there and come back?
They can't go down to Louisiana and come back.
So
Parked at the airport.
On the,
city rules is 48 hours. So you can park anywhere within the city as long as you move your car 48 hours.
Okay, so they can park overnight.
I suppose yeah, I mean, it's public parking, so.
Yeah, unless you wanted to
Not
have it
overnight camping,
signed.
though.
Yeah, unless you wanted to have it signed as something different. But now we're talking roads and that's city council, so.
Okay. All right, next.
Sorry, Jesse.
It's okay. Noise, the fun one. So, the easy default here is just following city code. I believe it's after 10 PM. That's when the noise ordinance kind of takes effect of, I can't remember what the level is in there. I think it's just more of a no boisterous noise, essentially. So, do we want to restrict hours to 9 o'clock, knowing that there's tear down, or let them go right to 10 o'clock and just understand that after 10 o'clock, when your event is done, noise ordinances are enforced, and we just put more of a disclaimer, you must meet city code requirements in regards to noise. And maybe highlight a couple, high-level bullet points, but indicate it to them that way. Or do you want to say, amplification of sound must go through a park board application? Definitely. Those are the kind of things I'm thinking with noise. I mean,
I think so,
there's
too.
a few different ways to go around this, so.
All right, very good. Before we comment, any questions for staff? I have just one quick question. We briefly talked about inviting HRA or somebody from North Star to this meeting. Just want to make sure that that invite did in fact go out.
Yep, we
Okay,
sent
very
it to
good.
Eric Charpentier.
Okay, very good. Was there any feedback or anything that?
of the HRA.
I think I'm on that committee too. I'd have to go back and check my notes, but I just want to make sure that they had an opportunity to be here if in on this conversation. So very good. So now open it up to comment on noise. Anybody? Please, Gabe.
I'll say, Kevin, as the chair of the HRA, and you're on the commission, I think owning and operating the high-rise that the band shell faces, we do want to make sure that our residents are accommodated within the city ordinances and make sure that noise is brought down and done at 10 o'clock.
Right. To me, city ordinance is the curtain of which we would, that is what we would use as the,
And I think
as
that's
the
fair, and I
behavior.
think we just want to make sure that that's clear, that you're done at 10 o'clock, no more music.
And there may potentially be scenarios where we would say you could go past that, but that would have to come through the application process in front of us. And Don, please.
My 2 cents worth too is that that area is sort of loud. We got football games, 4th of July, all these things like that. So noise kind of comes with the territory in that neighborhood. But I think in general that, the amplification stops at 10 would be something most groups could work with. So.
Okay, very good. Any other comments on using the 10 o'clock as our, yes, please. Sorry.
So, just to clarify, the special events permit that the city has, is going to be separate from our application? Or will they have to go together? Because as a question on the special event application asked about amplified sound. And then, yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, so typically, the council would like to see things that are coming to them if they involve the parks to go through the parks first. So then the parks is all signed off on, and then it comes to the council, so.
So then would we kind of possibly use this paper application as a guide? Because like some of these things in here would pertain also to what we are trying to sort of recreate.
I think we're going to be asking staff to create what the application is going to look like specific to Mississippi Landing Trailhead, then come back, show it to us, and let us have a look at it.
What you're referring to, obviously, is kind of the event application.
Yes.
So it's probably going to end up looking very similar for the stuff that's going to come to this group.
So you have your basic application, boom, boom, boom. Oh, you got amplified sound, you got that. Okay, you need to go to the event application. This is a different process that goes in front of the park board and so forth, right?
Okay.
Is that what everyone sees here?
That's kind of where I'm at. It's probably going to be the same application for everybody. I mean,
Initially, right? And then
well,
if-
it would probably be just the same application. You check certain boxes, and then when staff's reviewing the application as it comes in, and we say, oh, it has amplified sound, that's our automatic trigger that goes to park board.
or goes to this event application.
Or big event
Okay.
automatically goes to park board. And, we have certain thresholds that triggers this application that goes before park board. It doesn't meet those thresholds, or they didn't check the right box. That's one staff takes care of. So in this one, I'm anticipating that amplified sound every single time for sure goes to park board.
Vendors, amplified sound.
And maybe this is clarification between the mayor and Jennifer that amplified sound events would only go to park board. Would we want to bring this after park board approves it to go to council so the council's aware of it, or it's in parks, let park board make that decision?
I don't think the council necessarily needs to approve it because it's within the park. So once the park board's approved it, it should be fine. What I would say is put it on the report from what the park board has done to the council, so the council's aware of it. But as long as it's happening in the park, that's parks board's decision.
And my trepidation with going further is that you in many cases, is park board approves it, goes to city council has a question, another 2 weeks goes by, let's kick it back to the park board to get this question answered. Next thing you know, we have an applicant who's sitting for 2 months with no answers.
And that's typically why when something goes to the council, they want your guys' approval on it first, so that we're not asking those questions. We've already got
Right.
your approval on it.
So to follow up with that, so Street Fest happens in the parking lot downtown. They decide that they're gonna have the music in this park. So then that would be like 2 applications. I have no idea if they're gonna do this. This is just me inquiring because that is always approved by city council because it's down there. So I guess we'll deal with it when it comes. I'm just like making up stuff. I'm just thinking of events that they may use the amphitheater.
Yeah, but anytime we have an event application, it goes through all the departments anyways. So it goes through police department, it goes through all the other departments, so.
I think if we were to have an event where, like a street fest, and I guess it depends on the event. If they just wanted to use the amphitheater and then just the angle parking, I don't think that would be a trigger for something to go to city council. But if they wanted to block that block of East River Road and make it more of a street dance and use the amphitheater, I think that's an application that you'll end up seeing go to both boards.
Right. Okay. So just, okay, what else we got?
Signage, do we want to allow for, when events are coming in, how do we want to handle if they want to put signage up? Do we want them to be allowed to put any signage in the ground, knowing that we do have an awful lot of irrigation that's going in there now? Or hang something from the amphitheater? Or anything else for that matter. So both in-ground or hang up, do we want to allow signage
During an event,
for an event, correct? And what does that look like?
right? I have some thoughts on this, but first we'll have any questions for staff. Very good, I'll open up to comments. Here's where I'm at on this. I think we make this simple. We have the foldable type, some version of a portable foldable screen that you can, or a unit that you can rent from the city, has to fit on that. You can rent them, you fold them out, has to fit on that, and then they got to be picked back up. That would be my leaning versus people having drive stakes in the ground, hang stuff on buildings or whatever. Would be some version of, you've seen those metal triangular foldable sign, that fold out type signs. You can, that's what you're allowed to use. If you want signage, you need to rent them from us. They're ours. That way they look the way we want them to look. That'd be my leaning, is some version of control on signage that is temporary only, but that's just my thought. Or on parked vehicles or something. I have no idea.
You know, what you could do is you could put a couple posts in the ground that people could hang a banner between. You know, you could create a space where a banner goes. Banners are pretty standardized.
Jesse, is there, trying to remember the layout of the park, there's like a strip of grass kind of right along the road, right?
Yeah, behind the trail.
Do we irrigate that part of things?
We irrigate just about all of it, except for
Oh.
maybe the far south end and kind of the area by the kayak, but like along all that tiered seating, all of that is irrigated. Now, because we have a nice set of plans, we're gonna have a pretty good idea where the irrigation lines are if we wanted to put some posts in the ground, but I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with the event organizer putting a bunch of stakes in the ground. I think if we were to do anything, it would be for sure by city staff.
Just make a note of it.
Stake in the ground saying no stakes.
No signs at this.
I don't know how you can have an event without signs. I mean, like, I'm thinking of a race, like a 5K or a bigger event. Like, where do you get there? Where do you go? Or I feel like we need to have, I mean, maybe it is the sandwich board thing, and then we make a sign for them, though? Is that what you're thinking? Or we
I'm
give them
saying
the
that it just has to, they're able to use our sandwich boards and then they can put their own posters on them and
Yeah.
take them back off. But that was just my thinking. And you see those at events all the time on the sidewalks or wherever to direct traffic, tell whatever people what to do. But it would be, they'd have to use ours and
To
Rent
expand
them.
on that, if they didn't want to use the A-frame, they could bring their own signs. Just know that they would be a temporary in nature. They couldn't be posted in the ground. It would be just like one of those,
correct.
kind of like a barricade. It goes flush on the ground and you throw sandbags on to keep from tipping over type of thing. That it
I think
Temporary
doesn't go in
signage
the
is
ground.
allowed. We could say that temporary signage is allowed.
I think you can just handle this with some kind of verbiage within the application that just says, due to irrigation, you know, posts, or we're banning posts. We're
Signs
banning
can't be attached to
posts.
buildings. They can't be driven into the ground. It's that simple, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Is it possible we could put hooks on the amphitheater? Like, so like if someone was gonna put like a banner, a 10-foot banner or whatever's gonna fit there, we put the hooks, they have to have a banner with a grommet or they have to bring string. I just know from past events, like people bring hammer and nails and just start nailing into things that they shouldn't be doing.
They just lost
We don't want that.
we're not charging for.
What? Yeah.
Lost their deposit.
Yeah, we just got
Might not notice.
Yep, exactly right. Now we're out, now we're
we don't
out.
have a deposit.
Don, please.
A couple things. To the amphitheater will have rigging. So that is, at least that was the idea in the design, is to have rigging that for light and sound equipment. And hopefully that could be used for doing banners or something like that as well. So I think that possibility
Okay.
could be there. The other thought was, the park is gonna have a sign, correct? A standard, your standard basic. Is there a possibility that you could say, have a little post that comes up or underneath it or something and include it with it? So in other words, you could almost have it kind of built into your park sign. Just a thought.
We'll have a concrete base around it, right? That's our design standards.
under the sign to hold a banner.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think we're gonna get applicants that want to direct traffic and wanna say this is over there or this, maybe other things, so,
But those should be all temporary in nature.
all temporary, yeah.
Yeah,
Good
like
with that? Well, again, the first year will reveal a lot of these issues for us, and we're gonna learn as we go here a little bit on this.
Yeah.
All right, very good. Next item, Mr. Dean, please.
The other thing on this, and I have a few other ones, but insurance, do we want to require insurance? I think we kind of covered this before, is that city does have insurance, so we're kind of covered in case there is damages, but we're not to not further restrict the use of the facility, we're not going to require insurance, is that correct? I know we talked about the potential for for the ones that can't get a daily insurance that aren't for Timmy's birthday, if you wanted to purchase insurance, that could be an add-on to the application. I mean, do we want to require insurance at all? And if we do want to require insurance, what does that look like?
Mr. Bedell.
Super simple for this is a part of your event application is typically when it comes to you, then you can put those parameters on top of it. So you can do it by a case-by-case basis. It's already what you do for events.
And Mr. Bedell, if I may ask, this is something in your line of work that you see all the time, being either required to or
Absolutely. We're very thankful when it doesn't happen, but typically you're budgeting $200-300 for the insurance
for an event?
For an event,
insurance.
yep.
Okay. So I'm hearing that we could potentially just govern this or handle this through the application process on that more robust application that would come along with an event. Is that right?
Yeah, it's what you currently do.
So just depending on the event, we may require liability insurance.
In all honesty, I mean, I feel like I don't have the tools to really answer this. I feel like this is more of a legal city of Brainerd, somebody else out there in this building that should be answering this
Lawyer guy
question.
should have known about
Please, Gabe.
So the city of Brainerd does already require to be added as an additional
Insured.
insured on events like the Street Fest that we've talked about. So the Brainerd JCs add the city of Brainerd as an additional insured to hold our event in the city streets. So I think events at the park that would be large enough to warrant it, the city would be added as an additional insured on somebody else's insurance. If Timmy's birthday party has Don come in and play some sing-alongs I don't think insurance is required.
Right.
Right. And I think
Larger
that's
events,
already handled.
right?
Larger
Larger events.
events, the city already required.
I'm looking forward to my birthday.
Yeah. We went from Billy to Timmy, so that's good. I like it.
Blame it all on my roof. Start singing along.
All right, do you have what you need on this one?
I think so, just
Very
case
good.
by case, and we'll adjust it as part of that application.
All right, next item.
So, and I asked Jennifer about this during the meeting here, is the ability to sell tickets for events in our parks, so make them a for-profit event. Is that something that we would allow? I don't even know if the code covers this, if that's a different type of permit. I mean, I don't know.
I'd love to see it, because then we could steal their idea and figure out how to get people in our parks. But I'm going to go Dave first.
Yeah, you already have precedent for it. You have a stadium that requires tickets to get into when you used to have baseball games. So you already have precedent for that happening within your park system.
Okay. Gabe?
Yeah, and if you didn't know, the park board, you guys are responsible for all like the boulevards and streets and everything. JC's charge ticket entries to get into the street fest. It already happens. It already happens. I think we just allow it to happen in this park and see what happens. This is an amazing new park that we're gonna learn a lot.
Yep. We already have entities that charge to use bouncy houses or whatever in our park events. So it happens all the time already.
The no post requirement is going to make it difficult to keep people out of the area, but that's just a issue with the way that an open amphitheater is.
Okay. Any other thoughts? All right, you got what you need on this one?
Yep.
Very good. Next item.
So that kind of goes into the, off a little bit, but alcohol at the park. So currently we have no alcohol in parks allowed whatsoever. Now, is there going to be an exception that we would allow for a certain event that it's sealed off, like a street fest or something, or say a rib fest type of event where they wanted to bring in a vendor and allow for something, or they wanted to allow? Is that something that we would entertain with trying to make an exception for an event like that?
Very good. Any questions for staff first? All right, comments.
As much as I like hanging out with a beer, hang outside, it's almost easier to not have anything. Unless, we have some for softball tournaments, we have some for whatever, else, miscellaneous things at Memorial Park. But this park may be a little too nice to be opened up for plastic beer glasses laying everywhere. Correct, see, there it is, but now we're down to nothing, I lost my 500 already.
Andrew, please.
Yeah, we have a number of great craft breweries in the area. I think it's good to unlock additional options to have them come out and participate in our parks in the way that they can't right now. And I think an outdoor concert, an outdoor space, food truck area we designed specifically to have vendors. I think this is a great place to try it. And Katie?
Yeah, I just want to comment on this whole concept. Memorial Park is excluded from that in the code, just FYI. And then also, I would be cautious because the Smiles for Jake got denied because they were so close to the river last year to have alcohol. And with this being even closer to the river, something to think about if you want to do it, figuring out a way for the vendor or whoever is renting it to fence off the river or something for extra security. It got turned down because of how close it was to the river, so it's something to think about.
I think you have to clarify
Jennifer.
that part of it, just from a legal standpoint. I believe it does have to be a contained area because of the underage business, and you have to card people as they enter. So that it's their burden if that is something that it's allowed, but you'll see it at like small town fairs, and they do beer gardens. It's always a fenced-in, contained area because you can't allow for underage to get in the area that's not controlled. So I believe it's a requirement that it has to be somehow cordoned off.
All right, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, I saw Jennifer first.
So just FYI, the city code right now just allows alcohol in Memorial Park. And so if this is something, maybe the park board wants to have a bigger discussion on this, and that's something that we should bring as an ordinance to the city council if the park board is considering alcohol in other parks besides Memorial. It would just need to be, our city code would just need to be amended.
Very good. Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, the city code has actually two different sections. One is intoxicating liquors, which is booze, which is not allowed in any park except for Memorial Park. And then there's another one that deals with beer that is allowed in anywhere in the city.
Right.
You can drink beer on the sidewalk in the city of Brainerd. You can't drink vodka.
Gotcha.
Right? So intoxicating liquors, not allowed. A beer vendor, a craft brewery, as the city code is written, as my regular eyeballs, non-lawyery eyeballs read it, says it's allowed.
Right.
So it's a gray area.
And I'm going to pressure my memory here just a little bit, but I believe this came before us in Gregory specifically. This got talked a little bit about with Gregory and the arts in the park, and it was the opinion of this group that we should allow beer. I think even the hard stuff. In Gregory, it was our opinion. I believe we acted upon that, and then it ran into a roadblock within the city. So. I think that what I'm hearing here, at least preliminarily, is that we would like to allow it if we can get through all of the obstacles. So please, Mr. Bedell.
Yeah, your memory serves you correct. And this board put forward to the council that you were under the guidance that you would like to see beer at one Arts in the Park event, which would have been fantastic and amazing. Still was, even without the booze. But would have been even more spectacular. It's definitely something that has to go back before the city council. I still disagree with our interpretation of that rule saying that we cannot have it, but that's a discussion for the council to have. I do think that the council will be looking at that.
I think it's a discussion for the park board to have. You have control over the parks. The city council doesn't have control over what happens in the parks.
Well, I would like to see us move forward with that. I know of a couple of events that would love to see that happen.
Okay.
So put it on.
Can I ask that we pull this aside into a separate item for a future agenda first? Then we'll figure out the booze issue first. This would allow staff the time to talk to legal, to talk to whoever, so that we can then make a decision to then decide whether or not to bring it back before the council. But I think the park board has been fairly unanimous in the past that we would definitely like to see booze in our parks at times.
I know. I was like, I want to make sure we're only for special events.
I want to make sure you get that quote in total, right?
Only for special events
That was-
that are approved by us.
Correct, yes, you got it. Just make sure you get the high point, exactly, right.
I want everyone sorry.
For certain events, correct?
But I do like what Andrew said about arts in the park, or you didn't say arts in the park, but the breweries being an art.
Listen, we absolutely believe
Hey, I
and
just figured it out.
continue to believe that the brewery, it is a craft art.
I brought-
My gin and tonics are pretty, I gotta be honest. All right, you have direction on that at this point. We're gonna kind of table the discussion on that for right now. It's a much larger entity. We'll maybe weave it back into.
We're entertained in pursuing that direction.
There we go.
Okay.
We're entertained in pursuing the direction. We gotta
Got it.
fret it out. Okay, next
The only thing
item.
else I had written down was a policy on overnight storage. So like the Mayor mentioned, if you're having a July 4th and you want to set up the night before, what kind of policy do we want to put in there that, just at your own risk type of thing? But you do have to reserve the facility for that previous day as well. I don't know what other discussion on that one.
All right, any questions for staff on this first? All right, comments are open.
I think this is the same scenario we've talked about. We do the same thing for Arts in the Park. You can set up the night before at your own risk, and there are people that do it. But most of them then police it themselves. So.
Gotcha. Anybody else here? My only concern with this is this really easily turns into camping in the park for that night, but, so I think you have to be careful that if we say at your own risk, well, then you're allowed to sleep there in your van to watch over your whatever, but,
48 hours on the street.
Down by the river.
excuse me, Don?
Your van down by the river.
Yeah, exactly.
And are we going to require them to rent the facility for that additional day?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Absolutely.
wanted to make sure.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And it's an at your own risk, no camping, no overnight camping allowed, right?
I think we should add that.
All right, is that the end of your list, Mr. Dean?
That's everything I had, unless there was
All right.
anything else that anybody else.
Nope,
could
I'm gonna
think of.
open, Mr. Bedot's gotta leave. Is there anything that you feel like we have missed?
Nope,
that
I
needs to be
just want to
discussed?
get on to the next item.
Okay, very good. I'm gonna open it up to the gallery. Thanks for coming and everybody in this discussion. Is there anything more that needs to be discussed in anybody's mind here? The board or gallery? Mr. John.
5 and I'm here for the next item.
Okay, it's 5:24. Got it. All right, let's move on to our next item. You have what you need, please.
Yes, sir. So at the 28th council budget workshop, the council discussed softball field lighting in the proposed 2023 capital budget. During that discussion, the inclusion request of those lights was mentioned that it wouldn't be acceptable and it wouldn't be approved with that expense included. So there was discussion at last night's council meeting. There wasn't a ton of, you need to do this from that meeting. So I think what we really should do is, based on the initial conversation of that they're probably not going to want to see those memorial lights included in a capital budget, is how do we relook at that capital budget? So in this, in the packet, we do have included in there the operating request as of whatever it was in November, and the capital request. So if there's adjustments that the park board would like to see with the capital, I did talk with Troy today to essentially, I'll call it Band-Aid these lights, to essentially get another season, hopefully out of them. We're requesting that if we can't do a replacement, that we would do replacing capacitors and ballasts in all the light fixtures that are out there currently. to address some of the issues that we're having out there. And hopefully it helps fix it for a year. It's tough because it's kind of like a car you don't know what's wrong with. You start with the top of the list and you fix that, and if it doesn't fix the problem, then you work your way down. Hopefully replacing all of the capacitors and all the ballasts gets us for a year or two, and it might not even get us through a couple months. It might be a different problem, but we won't know until we replace them.
Is there anyone in town that can even bring a lift that high for those lights anymore?
So we got the dollar amount from Holden, who has actually got to go get a lift from the cities, I believe it is. So Holden gave us a number just shy of 30,000. So if we're going to remove the 400,000, what we would request is to include 30,000 in the budget to essentially replace all the capacitors and all of the ballasts. Now, again, this doesn't include any of the wiring, any of the issues that we have. So this may not fix those problems, and they may, after we replace them, we turn the lights on, it may not even change anything, but it's hopefully going to help us get through a season with the existing facilities. And then potentially you could look at next year, and the concern is the wiring is most likely going to be at more higher expense than the lighting would be. Because not only do you have a lot of wire that's expensive, but then you have to trench into every single pole, and then the controller box is probably going to have to get replaced on every single pole too. So that expense is probably more than the 30. So we don't have that number. I know Troy was trying to work with them on getting that number, what that is, but we just didn't have time before tonight's meeting to get that number collected. But we were able to get at least the number for capacitors and ballasts. So that would be something that we would request, is at least allow us to do that part of the work to try and hopefully address it for this year. And then if we continue to have problems and we want to look at wiring, or look at the breaker boxes in the concession stand, which most likely will not change the issue that we have with them. Right now, they overheat. Part of that
They're
is
garbage. I'll leave it at that.
part of that is the amount of juice that they pull. There's a lot of power going out to those lights because they are inefficient. So they do run hot, and then you have a lot of equipment in the concession stands. So we do have problems with those overheating. This, replacing ballasts and capacitors, is not going to fix that problem. So that'll continue to be a problem until we address that problem. But again, this might help us at least keep the lights on. I don't know.
Very good. Thank you. Questions for staff? Okay.
I've been sort of the face of the Park and Rec since the mid-1990s, oddly enough, and those lights have been bad ever since I got here in '92. We've only put Band-Aids on these things every year, and now we got shot down for, why even have a park board? That's my thought. We came up with the idea of put the $400,000 for lights, which is expensive as hell. But why have a park board if what we decide to use for our budget gets shot down?
I have a question for
Yeah, please.
Jesse. Is there, outside of like redoing the concession building, is there a way to improve the cooling in there? Or is the heat both in there and at the top of the lights where all the...
I think a lot of the heat is generated because of the juice that's going out to the lights.
It's just...
It just gets exacerbated with the appliances that are in the concession stand. Could you potentially do some venting? Yes, but I don't know if that would solve the issue.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question for staff. Would ixnaying all of the concessions help with this lighting issue for next year?
The concession stand just not having
Did we
appliances
say that the
run.
concessions are contributing to the load on the breakers? The refrigeration, whatever we're using in the concession is a contributing factor to the lights not working?
I think it's potentially contributing to the breaker issue.
Okay.
Of the breakers overheating. I don't know if it's, again, this is back to that car analogy. The breakers might have absolutely nothing to do with it, and it could all be the capacitors and the ballasts. And that could fix the problem for the next 5 years. It could fix it for a month.
Gotcha. Understood. I want to be respectful of both Dave and Gabe's time. Do you have something specific you want to say and then you can leave, or do you just want to be here for the whole time? I'm just trying to help here.
I have nothing specific to say. I'm here to be part of the conversation and try to answer any questions or be as helpful as I can being here as a member of the city council.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Same for you. You're here for the duration. Okay, very good. So I'm going to continue on with comments here.
Okay,
if anybody has anything.
yes. So are you asking us, you're asking us to revise the budget, or are you just asking us,
Can you scroll to the capital side, please? Thank you. There we
you're
go.
asking us to redo what our ask is, or are you just asking us about tweaking and putting $30,000 in there instead of 400,000?
Based on the comments at the November 28th budget workshop, my recommendation would be to revise the capital budget to remove the replacement of the lights, evaluate the other items if anything was, we took this out because we really wanted to prioritize the lights, but it still needs to be addressed. And if the park board feels that it needs to be addressed in 2023, does that come back into the budget? And then if we do remove the 400,000, can we revise probably, I would say I don't know if it would be in the capital budget or if it'd be an extra to the operating on R&M for the softball. Either way, accommodating an additional 30,000 to accommodate the, I'll call it rehab of the lights.
I have I guess, question for council liaison. In watching the workshop, it felt like most of the discussion was around not liking softball happening and not so much about the dollar amount and hitting a levy target.
Yeah, I think
So,
yes. I'm sorry. I thought your question was done. Continue.
just if we revise the budget to say, well, we would like, whatever, 15,000 tear down the warehouse or whatever we look at, is that also not really going to fly because ultimately it's a question of we want the levy at 3%.
So, yeah, I think there's two things at hand, and I think Councilman Johnson can speak, and Jesse, you can speak as well. I think, from my perspective, what I would do right now, given the chance, given the fact that you have an opportunity right now to put something else in front of them, is I would put a couple options in front of them and have them select if they're willing to do so. I know that's a little interesting given what our budgeting process typically is. You've submitted a budget, but now that budget has been spoken against by the council members. I think it's fair for them to allow you then to present something else in front of them, whether that is what Jesse said, a list of items that you say, here's $200,000 that we would like to tackle so that we're not then falling behind because we were going to push some things aside. But I do think that in either way, there should be some amount of money set aside from this park board towards at least keeping those lights functionable in some capacity next year. And whether that includes other items as well, or whether that's its own $30,000 to $50,000 that you're presenting in front of the council. For myself, I would put options in front of them and then at least give them the opportunity then to say no to the 400,000, no to this, yes to this, or whatever it ends up being. I don't necessarily think it's about getting down to a specific dollar amount. I think there's a larger question that they want to have with what is the responsibility of the community to lights on softball? What is the responsibility to the taxpayers on lights for softball? And again, it gets back to that. The problem we have is that this item comes up at the end of the year and is being asked in August for the following year's budget, which is what the council is really trying to get away from. And what has happened and why we've kind of got to this sticking point, if you will, let's call it that, is we're now having these conversations that are really shortened versus what they would normally be. And it's just raising questions that are now having to be answered by bringing in to special meetings. So from my own standpoint, I would say present a couple of options, option A, option B, and the initial option still being on the table because technically the council has not voted on this. In a workshop, they're not voting, but the language coming back from them definitely pushed it in the direction of the 400,000 is probably unrealistic.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in here real quickly. I just want to, there's a point of this conversation that is absolutely, in my opinion, being lost, and that is the fact that the only reason that this $400,000 was put into the budget request for next year is because we were told by staff that we could not facilitate a bidding process to actually entertain bids on this or have vendors come to us and talk about use and cost and warranty and future replacement, all those items. So I want to at least speak up and say that I am not not today, I may be in the future, but as of today, I am not necessarily a proponent of spending this $400,000 on these lights. I asked originally in my motion for the bidding process to happen so that we could learn about what may be in front of us, and was told that we needed to put it into the budget next year to facilitate that bidding. So that is, in my mind, why this showed up in our budget. As I sit here today, the $400,000 may be a great spend. It may not be. I have no idea because I just don't know the parameters of what these lights mean and the cost associated with them, their condition. I just don't know that. So that's where I'm at on this, and I just want to be very clear with the group that this didn't show up in the budget because the park board unanimously said, we want to put parks in Memorial. That is not how it got there from my chair. Where we go from here, I'm just gonna tell you where I'm at real quickly, is I believe that this is a perfect example of what we've been doing wrong over the past 25 years, and that is a very reactive personality to all of our budgeting processes that have happened with this park board. I believe that we are on the right path to understanding what it costs to own these parks. I believe that we're on the right path with our future ambitions and what they might cost. But this year, as I look even at our budget right now, it just feels very reactive to me. We're trying to fix items. Right now, the two items that are left in our budget are items that are literally falling apart. That's reactive, in my opinion, and it's unfortunate that we were put in a position where we had to put that in front of the city council at a late hour. It came out of the blue to us, came out of the blue to the city council. I know, Mr. Boder, that this has been existing, but this was not on the facility study. It never came up really as a dire need until we all sat in this meeting in, I believe, August and heard about it. So if it were me, this is what I would do for this year. I would say, look, Park Board is a part of the city operations. We're all in this together. This is a rough year for city council for a lot of different reasons. We understand that. It would be my leaning to leave in the $30,000 for the gazebo at Buster, put in $30,000 or $50,000 to patch these lights through for next year. That's it. Regroup for next year and come to you guys with an intelligent budget that actually means something, and then move forward with an educated response both from the park board as well as the city council.
I just want to add to that. We did have a really well thought out plan on the gray side, except for until the lights were added, which we did because Kevin said that. And again, if we can afford them and all that, that's great. But we spent a lot of time in meetings, and we really thought out this plan. And I am just concerned with Mike O'Day with the last thing he said in that meeting was like, it's a rough year and we have to cut things, and it's going to come from the parks. So I feel like no matter what we present, I don't even know if it's going to be approved, because it seems like that's kind of like where things may need to get cut. So I'm kind of nervous about putting anything in, but.
Yeah, I agree with where you're coming from. That was kind of what I was asking Dave earlier. Is like we're trying to cut significantly. We say, well, we need 30,000 to hopefully keep them running for the season. This is kind of a hope.
Another Band-Aid. It's a $30,000 Band-Aid is all this is going to be. It's going to get ripped off, and it's not going to work worth a darn. We've tried many times in the last 15 years. They've been trying to do different things with these lights, and they break all the time.
Well, Tim, you say that, but then we have a 30-year capital plan. And if this has been happening since 1992, I want to know why it has not been in the 30-year capital plan. That's the issue. The issue is not whether or not the lights work or do not work. The problem is the lights showed up in August in a 30-year capital plan. The council has been very clear that they don't like things showing up, and this is why. It's not because they don't want to have things for the community. It's not because they hate softball. It's because when things show up at the last second, now this entire process that should be a long, drawn-out thing where we're figuring out what the cost is, we're figuring out what the problems are, we're figuring out what this is, now we're looking at August to December, which the council only meets twice a month. You guys are only supposed to meet once a month, but meet a lot more than that, and I appreciate that. But that's the problem. The problem is the time frame. It's not necessarily is this or is this not what what you want to spend your money on. It's when we look at it from a larger picture and when the council has to make those decisions, they're beholden to the taxpayers and beholden to figuring out what is best for the community in terms of those dollars. And the questions they're asking are the ones that are the tough questions. You know, who pays for the lights? You know, is it the city? Is it the people that are using them? What is that combination of the two? I do think, and we have Councilman Johnson here, so I would appreciate it if you would allow him to speak as well, but I do think that the council is interested in finding a solution. It's just a matter of what is that solution and how do we get there? And sadly, I think the time frame then puts us in the same boat where it's, we've only got X amount of days to make that decision, and we'd like to get to a point where we can make a more intelligent decision.
I was president in 2014 and 2016, and you probably remember all the, I brought this up to the office I could back then because the lights were junk then. And it never got to the point where we actually thought about doing, we did Field 3 with new lights a few years ago. But it never got to the point where we put a dollar amount to bring to the council. So where this came up in August is a joke because it started coming up in 2012 when I started doing this stuff. It just never got to this point. It's been brought up many, 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 many times. Myself and Tony Saylor brought up when we presented the budget to the council twice. And it never got picked up on. It was always, well, we'll worry about it when we go forward. Well, how far forward are we going to go? We keep putting Band-Aids on this darn thing and it just keeps getting worse.
So we could ask for a Band-Aid one more time, or we could get nothing. And then we could really, discuss it when we have more of an option. Because we've already been shot down for the 400, just like what Kevin was saying. So maybe we ask for 50 because we know Jesse said 30. Sure, that might cover part of it, or most of it, but we don't know for sure. So if we say 50, it's way less than 400. And then at least we're hopefully maybe going to be able to get through another season, but then we can have this discussion later on. But Jesse, you also said we couldn't get any quotes until it was on our budget. So how will we discuss this further, actually?
Yeah, and that's a question for me. We have to find a way to get better to at least get the information from a sub and vendor, even if it's a control estimate, if it's a presentation, if it's a whatever it is. This $400,000 is just a number that we picked out of the air. Quite honestly, I think it's a number that you came up with, just guessing.
There's a full estimate.
Okay, full estimate, but.
So Musco gave us a budgetary estimate of $380 to replace both fields. Again, it's just a budgetary estimate. This is so that essentially so we can put a number in a budget and say, this is about what we're thinking for a future year. And we went from 380 to 400, just knowing add another year of inflation, throw 20,000
Right, okay, understood. Okay, got it.
The other pieces of that, we are still intending on having the gentleman from Musco come and present to the park board at the upcoming meeting. I'll confirm all the details with him to answer a lot of those questions that came up when we first started talking about soliciting for bids and the warranty information. So he will be able to speak so much more intelligently about these than staff ever will, with angle of those things and heights of poles and why the existing poles may or may not work. All of that, he's so much more versed in it. My 5 minutes, I learned a ton from him in just those quick conversations. He will be here to present on the information and answer a lot of those questions. He may be even able to provide any type of an update on the estimate of what it would look like to do one field versus the other. I think he had that in there as 200. I'd have to relook at it. I think it was 260 to do one or the other field. And then there's probably some savings because there was a couple shared poles to do another one later. But there's a lot of different ways to attack it.
Understood. Okay, so I just want to make one follow-up point here in that, Tim, what you're saying absolutely rings 100% true to me. It's what I've been saying about this, what I've seen in the park board since I got here. Here's what I think is the point that I'd like to make with that is that the poor planning and the failure to respond since this has been brought up within the park board does not become their problem.
Correct.
That's where I think the whole sticking point on this is that the park board failed to plan ahead for these lights. And we came to a point of where we're like, oh my God, they're broken down. We got to do something. That's what's wrong with this entire situation, and that's what I think we need to do. That's what I think needs to be addressed here. So from my chair, I'm not saying that we don't need these lights, but I am saying that we should have done a better job in planning for it in the years or even decades ahead of time, and that it was unfair for us to make that the problem of the city council. They may have responded differently, which would have this conversation completely different, but they didn't. They responded quite honestly in the way they should have. And in my opinion, that's got it back to us, guys. So here we are back with our original problem. How do we want to deal with this? We're not getting the lights this year. I believe that's obviously apparent. I don't think we deserve them, to be perfectly honest. Park board, over the past 10 years, did nothing to help themselves on these lights. I don't blame the city council for being like, oh, go back to your room and figure something out on your own. I don't blame them, to be honest. So this was poor planning on the park board side. So I don't like the way that the city council responded to it.
No, and I'll agree with that.
And I think that the city council should have said something more along the lines of, this is the park board, they work hard. These lights don't make sense to me. Let's go back to them and ask them how they got to this versus this is a dumb idea. So I will call out the city council for the way they responded was taken by many people on this board as an attack. And so that's also what added a lot of fuel to this was the response. And so I am critical of the city council a little bit on just how they responded to it. But in all honesty, we didn't do you guys any favor. So
Absolutely agree on a lot of the points, including just the communication back and forth as we go. You know, sometimes we forget that people are involved. It's not just dollars, it's people, it's time, it's energy invested, and a lot of times we forget that those things are the case. I've had great conversations with Jennifer Bergman and with Jesse since this has happened, as well as a couple of the council members as well. And I think that this is a great example of us as an organization needing to do some cleanup in the way that we operate between our various different commissions, but two of the big ones being BPU and being the park board. You have the ability to make decisions, and you have the ability to have some control over some decisions with oversight from the council. And I'm going to actually recommend to the council members that there is a little bit more buy-in into these committees, into these commissions that have that ability to make decisions, so that when we're getting to these things, there's a little bit more of a working relationship going on. So I completely agree with you, Kevin. I think that those are strong words in both directions, that there is blame to be had. And again, this is why we don't do things in August. It's why we don't bring budgetary items up in August, because then we run into these hurdles that are not necessarily there to begin with. So appreciate your words.
Okay.
I really have to go. I'm going to get in trouble.
Gabe, you have to go. Thank you. Oh, yeah, please, Gabe.
I have to go, but I'll just say one last thing. I totally agree with you, Kevin. I do think you guys should put a Band-Aid into the budget request, and we can try to add that in. But I agree with everything you said. You know, the park board didn't have this in the plan. The park board has made amazing strides in the last 3 years, 5 years, whatever, to everything for the park planning. And I think the city has invested a lot of levy dollars into the parks in the last few years, and I think we intend to do so going forward. This is just one little hiccup that I think we're going to figure out, and I think it may be a Band-Aid and then fix it in the future or whatnot. But I absolutely agree with everything you said, Kevin. Most importantly, I agree what you said about the city council. They get tons of things wrong. They had like 3 or 4 things wrong last night alone. Like every meeting, there's like 3 things wrong that I have to vote no on. But I think they got this one right, and I think we can move forward and get this fixed in the future.
Thanks, Gabe. All right, guys. We got to come up with something to go home.
Question for Jesse. You mentioned the lift for Holden. It sounds like that's a significant part of the cost of replacing the capacitors.
I didn't get the breakdown of how it was like $29,860. I did not get the breakdown of how that was determined. If it was mostly materials, mostly labor, or mostly the lift, I couldn't tell you that. I do know that the issue Troy is having is, one, the cost of the capacitors has gone up considerably, like a lot of things with inflation. And because the high-pressure sodium lights are outdated and most people have upgraded to LED, these types of capacitors and ballasts are becoming a lot harder to find as well. So you're not going to see that problem solve itself. It's going to continue to be a problem of finding and sourcing the material.
Yeah, I was coming at it from, right, it's 30 for this attempt. And to your point, this is the most likely thing, but it might not be the only thing, or something might fail further on. So how do we come up with an informed estimate to go to the council and say, listen, we know it's 30, right, it's an old car. How do we kind of guesstimate what a second shot at a fix might be? And not just make a number up.
Please.
If I may, Kevin, Mr. Chair, I don't know why you were advised that you can't go out to bid or talk to contractors on what it would cost to install that. I'm not aware of a city policy or a city ordinance that would say that you can't figure out what something is going to cost before you do it. I think the park board is allowed and should be allowed, and if there's something we need to change, park board policy-wise, city council policy-wise, we need to make that change so we can go out to contractors and figure out what it is going to cost. I don't know why you weren't allowed.
Thank you. For future discussion, something that you're definitely hearing that that's a valuable tool for us in the decision-making process, so.
Yep. So to clarify, 30 grand will replace the ballasts and the capacitors, thank you. If the park board wants to make the number 50 to allow for some flexibility, if we do that replacement and we find out that a few of the boxes are bad, the controllers, and allow for a few of those replacements as well to make sure that we don't have an entire bank go out type of thing. Again, can't really say that this is the cause, so it's kind of working down. 30 grand will replace those two pieces, and that's it. So if there's more that the park board wants to include, to have, I guess, flexibility to address other issues, if we find out day one we turn it on and half of them still only light up, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I just want to have some there. If the council's like, how do you get to 50, right? Because 30 easy to justify, but then right, it's a shot in the dark, and that's maybe what we share with them. Right, this is our best guess.
Again, I haven't
Price of
gotten a number.
throwing at a dartboard keeps going up. That's the way to look at it.
I haven't
knows
gotten
the
a number from Holden about like replacing all the wiring, but again, it's most likely going to be more than the 30 because of all the between materials and the labor that has to go into trenching new wire. It's probably going to be more. So if you do like 50, it's more of that gives us 20 to address one or two things. We can't maybe replace all of the wiring, but we know that this one pole specifically has issues. Maybe we just replace the controller on that one, or whatever the case is. It's whatever you want to request for a budgetary number. We'll work within whatever that budgetary number is.
Cool.
I'd also just like to say, I'm kind of with you, Tim, that I'd prefer to not even spend the 30 to fix it. Is there another way that we could be thinking about this to, if next year is a, regather and figure this out year, is there a way we can work our softball schedule in such a way that we play on the field that we have lighting on, or rework to just our season just next year alone to allow us to not have to put in this, just basically blow this $30,000 or $50,000 for nothing, and then regroup during next year and then come in 2024 with an educated decision on how we're going to handle this softball lighting? Could that be done and save us all the $50,000 that we're basically just throwing in the trash? Gabe, please.
We have an electric department. I'll ask the electric department to go look at the electricity over at Memorial Park and give us an assessment. That will be at little cost. Right. So we can try and we can do that as a starting point. I don't know what.
Yeah, we'll be talking with them about the temperature lighting in the city of Brainerd. So that'll be coming up.
But as far as the adjustment of not needing lights, and even the council was saying we don't start games till 6:30. Why don't we just start them at 6? We do start at 6. Every night, we start at 6 o'clock. So that's why I sent out a poorly punctuated paragraph, a bunch of emails to all the board. Most of you saw it, because it was 2:30 in the morning, and I was tired, mad, and pissed off at the same time. But there's only, I kind of lost my train of thought, but there's only so much we can do with keep putting the Band-Aids on that aren't working. The schedules are put out, and if we played every game in June, we didn't need lights. But we don't play every game in June. We go all the way through the year, so we get this softball in the fall. We have kickball season, whatever. We need lights on that park that work. And those, like I say, those are a couple of the only profitable venues we have for the Park and Rec.
Got one thing.
Yes, please, Andrew, sorry.
Oh, no, yeah. Katie put together some great information when I wrote the letter to the council. The fall session would be really impacted without lights. Most of those games, 6, 7, 8, 9. By September, we're losing the 8 and 9 o'clock slots. So even, you'd start at like 3 or 4, which I think that's, yeah. The summer, you could maybe shuffle it and lose some, but the fall, I think we'd just pretty much have to give up on if they bomb out by then.
Save them? Can you like play less games with lights in the summer and try to save them for the fall when you need them? Is that possible?
As it stands right now, Field 1 would not be able to be used with lights starting late April. I mean, it just wouldn't have lights. We ended the season last year not using Field 1's lights at all.
Because the lights were so bad, right?
Yeah, when you don't have any light shining on home plate, it makes it not only hard for the players, but hard
It's
for
dangerous.
the umpires to make calls.
Right. It's dangerous also. I mean, it's obvious.
Yeah, I guess generally it is kind of throwing money away, but
Yeah.
I think seeing the participation numbers over the years, it's worth investing in the program that brings 1,000 to 1,500 people from all over this area into our parks. So it sucks. I think this is better than not doing anything and saying good luck.
Yeah.
Again, that's why I was kind of in a bad mood when I wrote my stupid uneducated comments that I sent out to the board and to you people. They were saying there's only 60 people it's going to bother. There's a lot more than 60 people that it's going to bother. Whatever board member said that kind of set me off in a bad mood.
Oh, that was me.
It may have been, but it's
was
a
totally.
hell of a lot more than 60 people.
I mean, nobody is saying that we're not going to address these lights. Nobody is saying at all that we're not going to address this light issue. I think what the crux of all of this is how are we going to address it, and really who should pay for it, and how should it be paid for?
I can take a crack at a motion.
Please do.
unless you want it. I move to add $50,000 to our 2023 capital budget request for replacing capacitors and we'll call it contingency for additional maintenance to limp the lights through this season. Yeah, that's what I got.
And no other changes to the proposed budget? We'd still have the 30 in there for the shelter, I believe, right? Can I see the budget again? I'm sorry. So we'd
Yeah,
remove the 400 and change, we'd basically change 400 to 50, correct?
Yes.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? One more time. Is there a second?
I will second that, as long as we can put in a like little star there that includes how everything we just talked about, so that the council will realize that, our feelings on it, that we're not just like wanting to throw away 50,000, that we tried some different options, like this is just what we are coming up with. I know it's really long.
Your liaison abandoned you.
Well, maybe you can play this part.
We had the super sub still about it. It's best.
You are
I
the,
have full confidence that Gabe will at least relay the conversation to city council, with or
I'll
without
relay that.
bias.
It's a begrudging $50,000 because it is, in a sense, almost throwing it away if it's just a Band-Aid. Yeah.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Very good. Anything you need, Jesse?
I do have one more quick one, and
Please,
don't
let's do it.
everybody raise your hand at once, but I have been requested to find somebody from the park board that would be willing to volunteer to jump on a Rotary Park solar project work group to hammer out these details between the Rotary Club, the park board, and BPU. We just, from the discussion previously, we need to discuss how this looks, where this goes, just details. So we were hoping to have a park board representative as a part of that work group.
I'll open it up to volunteers first.
Will this last more than 3 weeks?
Yes.
I anticipate that it would.
Sounds cool to me, but you also seem interested.
I'm not interested. Well, I am interested, but I'm really busy. So. Andrew Shipe. Got a volunteer. Boom. Just like that. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew.
Solar's cool. Huh?
One more piece. Sorry, Katie did just remind me. So the No Child Left Inside grant we talked about at the previous meeting. Something that we did not, getting into this application, we realized that there's an option in there of how much we want to indicate for a grant match. So we didn't discuss that in the park board meeting previously. Now, we can get it pretty much down to what, like $1 or 1%, which is almost nothing. I mean, we can find $5 or $50 somewhere in the budget to fit 1%, but obviously, the more you indicate that you're going to match the grant, the more likely you would be granted the funds. So we just wanted to clarify. As of right now, our assumption is, just because we didn't approve anything, 1%. But if the park board wishes to put something more sizable that would look better on an application, I'd open it up
Understood.
to that comment.
What buckets could this money come out of? What are the potential buckets? Capital?
Park dedication?
Park dedication?
Could
Give us some options here
I think
of
park
buckets
dedication
and
would
mounts.
probably fund for this.
Who?
The park dedication. Otherwise, we could probably put it in the operating as part of the activities fund.
Is this ARPA possibility also?
Could be.
How much,
Have to-
and how much are we
well,
talking, a minimum and a
well,
maximum?
So here's the challenge. The application is due Friday, right? Friday? So this week, Friday, or this, end of this week. So if it would be ARPA, we wouldn't have an opportunity to bring this to
That's
council
correct, yep.
to get approved. So
And how much is the total we're talking about here?
I think we're
Maximum?
applying for 5,000 of grant dollars.
5,000.
So we could match up to 5,000.
Correct. We could match.
Hypothetically.
1% would be $50.
We'll find a way to match 5,000. Am I correct on that, guys?
Yeah.
We have lots of places we could get this.
I would
Do we? Yeah.
want to
Yes,
use
I think
park
we do.
dedication.
Yeah,
Like,
park dedication, we've got lots of
double our
places.
money?
To clarify, so you want to, essentially, we're applying for about a $10,000 investment. Half of that would be covered through this grant. Is that correct?
I think we would, if I'm hearing us,
Or do we want to match less? We can match 20% of the 5,000, so it would essentially be
what is the number that makes this look the best? What are we looking?
100%.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
obviously, right. $5,000, right, $5,000, that's what I'm saying. 5,000, I say we can find $5,000, no problem.
Yeah, why do we have to
a lot of
match?
skates.
Can't we find somebody to match a grant?
We might, absolutely, we might be able to.
I mean, I don't know. We'd have to find them by Friday? Is that what you're saying?
We have to know what number to indicate on the application, how much we're committing to match.
By
The end of this week. So
It's $5,000.
as of right now, our assumption is 1%, which would be like a $5,050 total project, because
Nice
it's
match.
5,000 of grant and $50 of match. But we could do up to 5 and 5, but I didn't want to commit that until Park Board says, yes, we'll invest $5,000 into this grant as well.
Yeah, do you need a
Remember, we're
motion?
purchasing skates.
This seems like an easy way to double your money
Yeah,
for
do we
something.
need- do we need 10 Yeah.
Sorry, Katie, please.
I'm just saying, we're buying skates, so just keep that in mind. I don't know how much skates go for. $50. I
Did
don't
we
know.
limit ourselves to only skate equipment, or?
that's what we-
I know that's what we picked, but
Yeah.
are
it
we
has to
pigeonholed
be-
in the application now to only buying skates?
Right.
And I thought
Beca-
gear too, right? Like any ice
In the
gear?
grant indicates it can't be like a recreation program. It has to be like
Right.
free, open to the public.
Oh, so it can't even be about,
Okay,
my kids have their own skates. They're fortunate enough for that. But the skates we have for free is nice that we offer free skates to the public, but there isn't a pair of skates in any one of the warming houses in this city that I'd want my kids to use. So I think $10,000 in skates,
Boom, done,
Isn't
$5,000.
bad.
And
like
with the
50,
addition potentially of
45 to
JCs
$60
down the road.
Katie,
Get some nice gear.
could we also use like the learn to skate walkers? Would those be included?
pushers,
Yeah. Elbow pads, some helmets,
Mouth guards.
mouth guards.
It's like 200 pairs of skates. That's, if at $50 a piece. I mean,
They're $100 a piece.
Yeah.
Could we stock the sled garage?
that's what garage?
Ooh, the sled garage has a big Sev.
Oh, yeah.
Let's just commit to the $5,000 now. We'll figure it out once we get it, right?
So
We don't need a
what-
motion for that, do we?
100%
do you need a
match,
motion? You do need a
$5,000,
motion on that.
$5,000. Is
Yep.
that correct?
Yep,
Okay.
I need a motion on that, correct?
Yes, please.
Move to match the No Child Left Inside application with 5,000 from Park
All
Dedication.
right, we got a motion by Andrew and a second by,
Second.
I'm going to go with Tim on this one. Second by Tim. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Very good.
I promise I don't have anything else.
All right, that's it. One more motion left, guys.
We have to do a public forum.
Oh, yes, I'm going to open the public forum at 6:07. If anyone would like to come forward, this is the time to bring forward any matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone online? Is there anyone in the house or the gallery? Hearing none, we're going to close the public forum at 6:07 and move on to item number 8.
Move to adjourn, Shape.
We've got a motion to adjourn, and a second by Schaefer. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much, Gabe, for attending. And
Yeah.
this
And
means a lot.
Jesse, put the